Hello and welcome to the Azure Innovation Podcast. I'm your host, Ross Kennedy. Thank you for joining the podcast series where we cover cloud-first companies, technology leaders, as well as influencers such as venture capitalists on all things innovation. Startups are truly leading the front edge of the AI era, delivering solutions to the most pressing challenges. And I believe that there are three essential ingredients for any successful startup. The first is technology, its enablement and access. The second is GTM support. How are we helping you reach your customers? And the third is the money side. It's things like credits as well as operating capital. And it's here on the funding side where we focus our conversation today. We all know how important the role of VC is today in the world of startups, but it's especially true in the era of AI. So Microsoft has a venture capital fund called M12. In today's episode, we will speak with Michael Stewart, investment partner at M12, on how startups are leading AI innovation and how they can differentiate themselves from the numerous AI-based solutions on the market today. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks, Ross. Thanks for having me on.
Well, listen, let's jump straight in. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and about what M12 is, what it does, and what its mission is.
Yeah. I'm an investment partner at M12 and maybe a little bit about M12's mission. We are a corporate venture capital fund and the only equity investment arm of Microsoft that invests in early stage startups. And our mission here really is to bring signal back to Microsoft, and I'll explain what we mean by that. In some ways, technology breakthroughs can be commercialized themselves as new signals of a market that's emerging, what users want to do, the usefulness of a technology, and appreciating it at the stage when it becomes a startup or becomes a company is really important. And I think that's one of the ways we can bring this information about the usefulness of a technology to Microsoft very early on in its development. And AI we'll talk about a lot in this, I think, in this conversation. But it's very important because an organization like Microsoft has so much depth and so much knowledge already about AI. Yet knowing exactly where great businesses can be formed isn't always a predictable and deliberate process. And so as a venture capital fund, we want to source and invest in those companies that we think could lead and could create those new categories and bring in Microsoft potentially as a partner much earlier in the journey that would be possible otherwise. If they were just working on a corporate relationship with Microsoft. So those two pieces of the mission come together, and we have a thesis-driven approach that lets us form an idea of how these inflections will come about, what kinds of companies or what kinds of opportunity areas we expect to be very attractive for startups in the future, and invest early using that thesis. And again, hopefully some of these result in partnerships or relationships with Microsoft that are hugely beneficial to both sides. And at M12, I lead the thesis in generative AI, video gaming, and deep technology, which is more my prior background before I came here.
It's incredible. So early stage, thesis driven. You've mentioned signals. Do you mind talking about those signals a little bit?
Yeah, a perfect example of that is really in generative AI, where thinking about the existing relationships Microsoft had, not just with OpenAI, but within our own company. There's this tremendous depth in AI already at Microsoft, and yet trying to understand where startups emerge, take a very risk-loving, but also high alpha approach to using that technology to create, again, a new category-defining company is really hard to see sometimes when you're running a large, $10 billion plus business. And what we try to do is have an independent approach where we do think more separately about how these technologies can create and lead to sustainable innovation in startups. When we invest, there's a process of just getting to know you between the startup and Microsoft that, again, if it leads to partnership and a close relationship, that's great. If it doesn't, the startup stands on its own as a highly viable and successful company that we identified in the first place.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I also love the term risk loving. I think I'll have to weave that into my conversation today. So when you think about it, how is AI impacting the startup landscape? Like we always know how startups are impacting B2B and B2C, but how is the nature of AI impacting the startup landscape?
Yeah, there's two major impacts. Some of these are still in the process of like delayed reaction. You wouldn't think that given where we sit sometimes. Um, the first big impact really is, I would call it cannibalization. So computer vision and the era of AI that directly preceded this moment was for all of us, including me, a big breakthrough and a big shock as to how much use a computer could be in a lot of everyday tasks that required analysis, identification, prediction, and yet it kind of stopped short of having the greater productive impact that we suddenly saw with generative AI. And with generative AI, um, that meant you were not simply making analyses and predictions and again doing the classification work, but you're creating new work, creating marketing content, images, all code, all of the things that we now see are like, wow, this is the generative AI moment. And from a fundraising and again back to venture capital point of view, this means that some of the startups that were funded in the CV area, the CV era, are seeing pressure to adapt and embrace what generative AI brings to them. If not, there's a strong enthusiasm for investors to jump in and fund new generative AI companies, which has really been, you know, the last year and a half or so of our lives is figuring out just how many of these startups could form. That impact is affecting different industries in different ways. And maybe when we talk a little bit later in this discussion, you know, um, seeing early on how you connect that power, because the power here is immense. It's from the point of view of an engineer and a scientist, which I am. I think in some ways it's underappreciated just how much utility and surplus um, this capability can bring. And actually, it's really taking longer than expected in some cases for the business builders to connect these to the markets, educate the consumers, get them onboarded, and starting this virtuous cycle of making money really quickly. The first couple places you've seen this um, in the startup world would definitely be in this Jasper, copy AI, the early work in connecting automated text generation to SEO marketing content, which is itself already a highly technology loving, risk loving area of making money quick on ad conversions. When you added AI to that, that let these companies rocket immediately to, again, close to $100 million ARRs in a very, very short period of time, which got everybody's eyes wide open. Seeing this happen in other industries, again, is a function of how much utility it brings. And the best businesses in the space we can see right now are all doing an awesome job of educating consumers who like the output that they get. They use more, they tell their communities, and it becomes a habit, which is again in code generation, GitHub Copilot is just an unbelievably powerful tool in every programmer's everyday job. There are a few others in graphic design and again generating this type of copy where it's so powerful, so useful, it saves so much time that we're never going back. Those are the front of the wave. Everything else that where we're investing to is where entrepreneurs are bringing this power directly to consumers. They may not have to even say this is generative AI, but the power speaks for itself. The usefulness speaks for itself. So we're seeing that play out in a series of waves right now.
Oh, that's incredible. You mentioned two very well-known and very fast-growing startups in the AI community, Jasper as well as Copy AI. Can you give us some examples of the AI-based startups in your portfolio? What separates them? What makes them so successful?
Yeah, and what we saw, and we could talk about typeface now, because I think when I was watching this go on, we were already working on generative AI as an element for, say, video gaming. That was the basis of a company called InWorld, which we can talk about later too. But it's the copy piece that was really, to me, surprising, because how people were getting onto these early platforms, they were oftentimes watching YouTube videos or big videos about, here is how I use this tool to do something I was already doing, but at 100 times the speed, or like 10 times as much at once, or whatever you want to say. But those platforms are really, for the large part, B2C. I mean, they could be B2B. They're small b, small businesses. And oftentimes the platforms themselves had a self-serve. Again, it's built for rapidly just getting up to speed. You may have trained by watching a video to learn how to use AI. And the safety and controls and guardrails and so on, of using that technology were being kind of discovered as they went along. When we were watching this go on, I was thinking, well, for enterprise to use a tool like this is going to take quite a lot of thought about not only, again, the safety of the output and the alignment, but also the safety of the material that's used in AI, and how to fit that to the level of control and awareness of, like, the brand equity going into creating copy images, whatnot. The first entrepreneur that I met that had fully thought this thing through and could see to the other side was Abhay, the CEO of Typeface. And this is at a time when the company was deeply in stealth. No one had talked about the company outside. He simply had this vision of how to add velocity to the world of this digital marketing creation that he knew as the CTO of Adobe. And again, that type of founder is already living in the future in some ways. So I immediately knew this is the kind of person I want to work with. It's an exact fit for the thesis I was formulating in my mind, but he was going to take it further and create a business. And this is exactly what we mean by the technology breakthrough is one thing. It sometimes alerts you to this potential. It's the founder who understands the end market, understands the customs of what large enterprise will need to see in order to integrate this into the workflows, that really sets it into, this is a high quality investment type of criteria. So that's an example of where maybe those early companies engaged in market discovery. The next phases of it really sometimes are more about mastery of the business and getting to those customers that are, again, going to be sitting on the sidelines until they see the level of safety, quality, and control that they expect. And we felt that Microsoft is the ideal partner to go hand in hand with them there, because, again, those are traits that need no introduction around here at Microsoft.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that. It is, security, safety, and trust is central to our AI vision. It's interesting. When I came to Microsoft a little less than a year ago, there were essentially three things that differentiated Microsoft from other players. The first was that I believe we have one of the most robust partner motions to help companies take their products to market, allowing them to stay focused on building great products. The second is that we have a fully integrated stack, meaning you can rest assured that when you're using one set of the technology, it will work natively with the second set of technologies. And then the last, of course, is our lead in AI, which is obviously quite compelling. I wonder, in your view, when you think about partnering with Microsoft and building solutions on Azure, what is it that's key to the AI startup success within the Microsoft portfolio specifically?
Yeah, and as you said, the thing we can sleep well knowing is that the depth of the technology here is better than anywhere else. And when startups approach us for investment, the thing I'm really listening for and looking for is, how much do you want to lean into working with Microsoft in a constructive way? Because it's going to be a double opt-in process to reach some of the customers that Microsoft is already providing services to, thereby heading off at the pass the hundreds of startups that also want these same customers. And that type of platform, as well as the, we might call it supermarket approach that Azure offers, allows successful startups to rise organically using as much of or as little of the services, capabilities, and resources that are available on the Azure platform, while existing within that branded layer of trust. It's really that touchstone I keep coming back to is you meet some founders who are really looking at the AI phenomenon as a fast and furious thing, like we'll move fast, break things, break rules, whatever, to just quickly get to the users. And yet, I think here is slow and patient and being the reliable partner that again, proactively respects customers' concerns about data, use of AI with their brand collateral, and other normal aspects of our confidential compute framework and other things we have at Azure. Certain founders already come to us from day one wanting to work with that as a strength they'll add to. Those are the people that get second, third meetings with us because, again, they're already ready to lean in. They kind of know how to use the tools in the tool shed here. And the lift is not quite so heavy as we're not sitting here saying, here, what we really need you to do is get to Azure. They're like, I already want to work with Azure, or I already am. I want a deeper relationship with Microsoft to go even further with those strong aspects of the platform that I respect.
Oh, that's great. It's interesting, as I mentioning before we started this conversation, I did a little light stalking on your resume, and it's pretty incredible. You spent a lot of time in the VC side of the house and understand investments well. This is becoming a very quickly crowded space. Essentially, everybody is registering an AI domain at this point. I wonder, what guidance would you give to companies that are looking to raise capital in this very, very crowded market today?
Yeah, and to acknowledge what's going on in the venture capital market is important because I feel like we're so much all hands on deck at M12, and I feel it in the Microsoft's conversations we have too about let's make sure we're really delivering on this promise of AI. If you look outside of that vertical, or that, I'm going to use the word bubble, but if you look outside of that world, let's say venture capital deployment is quite far down this year compared to last. It's maybe as much as 40% down in deployment, and is likely to continue trending down due to macro characteristics that are, again, out of the control of entrepreneurs. When you see that, you see, yes, certain flight to AI, like can we add AI in a superficial way, as a pastiche added to the startup? There's never really a successful, I can't think of too many times where that's really worked out so well, as much as the startups that are thinking deeply about what are the real problems that are unsolved out there? Who are the users who are, let's face it, unhappy with the tools that they have? And can I use AI as a direct vector to solve problems for them? And here's a way I directly connect with them. And so in some ways it's I'm saying, in short, find product market fit. This is, saying it in the VC language, but in plain English, it's more about where are the, to use a metaphor that was asked to me in a panel, where are the DMV waiting rooms of IT or the service world where you have some people who are just unhappy and would take anything, they'd be willing to hear out anything that improves the experience for them, makes it easier, handles it for them, but without sacrificing, again, trust, safety, and the other ethics that we mean. That's a business and tactics and kind of boots on the ground skill. When founders come to us and say, we've really found users that love our product and want to use more, and you find this is a vast gulf of users, and they're paying. That's another very important thing. Are you giving away the service? Or are you paying? Because running AI is expensive. Those stand out like as clear as day.
I was going to say, so deployed capital is down by as much as 40% in some geos. Product market fit is essential. And one of those great proving points is how many paying customers are people buying and renewing?
Are people paying? And once they're paying, Are they staying with the service because they get a dividend, they get a reward? This is related to these 4 Ds we talk about for sustainable competition. Now, why would we want to come up with rules or guidelines for what makes a startup sustainable, through this moment? Well, there are just so many new startups in the AI space since this year. And there's a website you can go to called There's an AI for that I direct people to from time to time. And when I was last fall, when we were looking at, can we map out what is going on in generative AI? We had a couple of dozen companies we were looking at. And I was thinking, this is going to get intractable fast. A couple of dozen companies, talking to them all, comparing them is going to be really tough. I think right now, if you go to There's an AI for that, it's like 10,000 startups. So you quickly have to just come up with like, what are the basic things that can get you through this? And first, there's data itself. Data is the new oil. I think we heard a lot about data during the big data era. Data has a completely different, but even more important meaning in the generative AI era, in that personal, relevant, live, fresh data that relates to what you want to do is critical for the quality of the output. There's no way to go generic. There's no way to just use an anonymized social graph, let's say, to give you high quality generative AI output. You really need excellent prompts and other tools to make to provide the model with the data it needs. But you need also a personal aspect of it that makes the output valuable to you. This is a completely different thing from the importance of data in training computer vision. This is really like the example I like to use is Ross and Michael's schedules for the day are probably, to a certain abstraction, very, very similar. We probably do certain things throughout the week that are also pretty similar. But those differences between our daily schedules are all that matters in this new era of, is AI helpful to you? And that's, again, where you really want to stand out and be safe against other startups is, has the customer taken their private personal data and entrusted you with it? Because they have not entrusted everyone with this data. That means something. That's highly linked to, will they pay for the service? Will they continue paying for the service? And although this sounds quite basic, actually making sure that startups stay on track and charge and discover the right price is one of the most important things we can do right now. Yeah, and really like keeping in mind what AI does for you. Does it pay off? We call this the dividends piece. This is back to the example of like Jasper and also GitHub Copilot. Again, if it's saving you 55% of your time, that's money kind of back to you. The newest examples that we'll see in AI that are going to be huge successes will all get to that payoff as early as possible. Like, can you really save someone time? Can you save them money, or both? That is, you have got to get to the actual quantification of what that is as early as possible, or else the customer will be comparing you against 100 alternatives. And then the third D is distribution. And that's really where we think Microsoft has an unbelievable force multiplier to our startups. If we can't find a way to bring in Microsoft as a distribution partner, I think we're really overlooking what our LP, what our partner can add to an early stage startup early on. It's not simply access to GPUs and access to the models. That's on everyone's mind. But it's really much more importantly about reaching those customers who are those big enterprise customers who are just overloaded with choice. If you can come to them in a way that's beneficial to both sides with Microsoft, that's certainly a giant advantage that you'll have over other startups. So data, dividends, distribution, and the last D is delight, which is simply, do you enjoy using the service experience? Do you enjoy what you're doing? Because if you don't, there'll be another application, there'll be another thing coming along very soon that will take your attention away. So every startup I really am excited about these days includes some or all of those 4Ds. And I think that keeping that internalized has helped us keep our thesis stable. And it also has helped make sure the companies that we've backed have done fine, despite the entry of 9,000 startups into the space. And to add a little bit about the number of startups that we see amongst those 9,900 startups that were formed, they're across dozens of different industry verticals. And, I think in the beginning, the idea was, can we define where AI is going to make the greatest impact industry by industry? But after a certain point, you kind of zoom out and you say, what this is telling us is that there's usefulness for AI in all of these industries. This is what entrepreneurs are seeing. And the right way to think about how this impacts your life is certainly there's a completely new world of work awaiting us in AI, as well as many other industries where it's been difficult to get AI to penetrate, like medicine, advanced manufacturing, and also research and development. Creating this ability to directly dialogue with data allows practitioners to explore these areas of industrial impact that are going to be easier and easier than ever. And that's all thanks to the tailwinds that are behind us. They're going to make AI better and better.
Yeah, that's great. You had mentioned earlier one of your areas of specialization, I think, was gaming. Well, what are the areas that you think will be most transformed by AI as you look sort of over the horizon in the next 2 to 5 years?
Yeah, video games, if you listen to Phil Spencer's company strategy series talk, this is an important point Phil has made in public and also in talks within the company, is that video gaming, as we think of it sometimes as adults or oldsters, is changing a lot. So young people experience video gaming like younger people like video gaming like experiences in ways that are more than just the games we might remember from when we were younger. They're much more integrated into movies, music, entertainment, celebrities, and their social platforms than they ever were. And that's going to continue. And where AI can help are two primary areas. One is in game creation. So AI GC or AI generated content, images, um, music, um, behaviors of characters is a way to make games not just cheaper and faster to produce. That's one of the ways you could take the benefit. The other is much larger worlds that are full or populated with much more interesting elements that keep the experience fresh. You can continue exploring and you're not really seeing like the same thing repeated over and over again. That is a very new corner we've turned with this partnership with InWorld and Microsoft that I think will bring generative AI and the kind of bottomless potential for interaction to millions of people. And again, this is something that doesn't exist now. So you have to kind of like the discussion with Abhay at Typeface, you have to put your mind a little bit into the future and imagine what that's like. Do I need to be talking the whole time to talking with the character or chatting with the character, like typing the whole time to experience generative AI? Or could it be more subtle aspects of the context that it uses to show me new things? Just like your everyday life, you're going to experience new things every day of your life for the rest of your lives. Gaming is going to be able to bring some of that verisimilitude into the amusements that you partake. And I think that's the piece that I'm really excited to see creators, not maybe sometimes non-technical creators, embrace, because this isn't a phenomenon just for coders. It's for the people who are more like artists, storytellers, playwrights, impresarios, and then the players themselves, those who want to appreciate something that's more interactive and see where the experience goes. It's just very hard to say what it's going to look like right now, but that's kind of the basis of my excitement.
I love it. One of the most common conversations I have these days is about how different area owners will say AI isn't there yet. And I always like to remind them that if you simply look at the jump between GPT-3 and GPT-4, it's fairly fundamental, right? If you look at just what's announced at Ignite. And so I always encourage people, don't try to imagine what's possible today when you're building your solutions. Think about where AI is going to be in 2 to 5 years from today. Because if you're trying to build for today, you're probably not going to be future-proofed particularly well.
Agreed, 100%.
Yeah. Well, listen, Michael, I've deeply enjoyed this conversation. I thank you for your time today. Thank you, Michael. Those were some incredible insights. I appreciate it. If you would like to learn more about Azure OpenAI or Azure Open related services that will help you build generative AI apps, as well as Microsoft programs to help you grow your business, check out our website. Thank you for listening.